How is the rain? How is the rain there? Is it, Sarah? Are the rains been bad just like in the Dab?
It's okay. It's okay.
It's okay there.
It's not that much worse, but it's raining.
Okay. Because I saw that in the Dab and Dagale and the various camps, it's been crazy. Like it's been raining nonstop for like 3 days now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is there any information from them today?
I mean, not of this morning. I mean, last there they are. I see the Dab. Just they just logged in. There they are. Perfect. So they are there.
Oh,
good afternoon, Dadab. I see Kasahun, I see Abdi, I see a few. Kasahun, good afternoon. Good afternoon, guys. Darafin, good afternoon. Abdi, how are you guys?
Morning to you.
Thank you. How is the situation in the Dab?
I think we had too much rain.
Not too much rain? Is it difficult getting to the camp in the morning?
Yeah, we can access the center, but it's like it's floods all over. We have no option, but we have to cross it courageously.
You were very brave this morning, I guess, to come all the way to the learning center.
Yeah.
So was everyone able to reach though? Kasahun, is everyone there? I see Serafin, I see Abdi.
Yeah, all of us are here. All here.
That's great. And you had class earlier, right? Class went well with Gillian?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just waiting on, I think we're just waiting on pretty much a few more remote students. I see Grace as well. Good afternoon, Grace.
Good afternoon to you.
How is the situation in Kakuma?
I'm sorry. Kakuma is nice. We have no rain today. Actually, we've not been having rain for the past 2 weeks. But the effect of the previous rain is really very great, and I'm having a lot of cough, and my voice has really gone bad. But yeah, I thank God everything is okay.
That's good to hear that everything is okay apart from the cold. We have a few students from the Toronto side who are down with cold as well, because it's been very cold here in Toronto too. We've had snow here instead of rain.
I've seen the snow from a friend. Yeah. Somebody sent me the photo and it's like double snow.
Yeah, and it's
really horrible.
So there's been rain in the Dab and lots of snow here in Toronto, which is weird for Toronto. I mean, in the last few years at least, not historically, I think, but at least in the last few years, it's weird, right? I guess I'm asking the rest of the Toronto crew to.
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it is, right? Yeah.
Yes. It's below average. Like the temperatures are below seasonal average.
Yeah.
And more snow for sure.
Yeah, it's been very cold and very snowy for Toronto standards in November, at least for November Toronto standards, we should say.
Yeah, this is early. This is early for so much snow.
Yeah, it feels like it's in January already. So all right, so I think everyone's mostly there. We're just waiting on Professor Zanini to join us as well. I know that she will be, so she'll be here, I think, in the next few minutes, I'm hoping. I think from what we want to achieve from today's session, I see Abdi has joined us as well, that's great. What we want to achieve with today's session is sort of this larger discussion I think that's what we want to go with. So we want to continue with the conversations from the book reviews and the book assignments, which everyone presented last week, both Wednesday and Friday, of course. So like the Dadaab students and everyone else presented on Friday. The Toronto students presented, you guys presented on Wednesday. So we want to continue those conversations, but we also want to sort of integrate on those conversations and sort of look to all the books into their major theme, into the larger theme that we're looking at, which is the one of culture, right? So we want to think about, in a sense, how is each book speaking to, I hear some background noise from somewhere. Okay, got it. How each separate book is speaking to and sort of representing an experience of culture, or speaking to or representing culture more generally. So in a sense, we want to think about the connections and disconnections between the books while they're speaking to culture and different ways of addressing culture. Here's Nambuso. She's waiting for the link. I'll send her the link again. There she. Here we go. So that's pretty much, I think, what we want to get from today's session. And also, as we were talking about with Jim previously, it will be more interesting also to get both perspectives now. Although you guys have had some interchange on the WhatsApp already between both sides, it will be even more interesting today because everyone's there, so everyone will get the chance to sort of integrate those two perspectives and larger dialogue as well. And I see Nambuso is there as well right now. So,
I just sent you saying, can you send me the link, please?
I did see the email. Thank you for joining, Nambuso.
Yes, thank
you.
you. Good morning. Is everybody there?
Everyone is here.
Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late.
No, it's fine. Everyone is here. So I was just introducing, I guess, today's discussion, and then I'll leave the floor to you now, Nambuso, and the structure you want to give. But I think, generally speaking, what I was saying was that we want to today speak to the larger theme, which is culture, right? Yeah. So we want to sort of see how integrate, in a sense, and find the connections and disconnections between novels, right?
Yeah.
In the way that they address representations or ways of speaking to culture, right? And experiences of culture. So in that sense, I sort of opened it up, and now I leave to you, Nambuso. I don't know how we want to structure it. If you have specific questions that you want students to ask, or
I'm going to put a few people on the spot because I was able to listen to the link that from last week's discussion, and I listened to all the voices and I thought, wow, we missed something here, meaning us in Toronto. Whereas in actual fact, I said, wow, because I was part of the Toronto discussion, the Dadaab people missed something here in Toronto too. So I'm going to put a few people on the spot and guide them, given the fact that I was able to listen to the link last week's discussion in Dadaab. And I'm just going to prompt a few people randomly to actually speak to the facts of some of the books that they read. So just give me a minute here, Nico, because
absolutely, Nambuso.
I wrote down some names here that I was, as I was listening to the link from last week. I'm going to start really with Toronto and give some people a voice from Toronto because it's easy for me to do that, not for any other reason. It's just easiness. Is Jim there?
Yes, Jim is here.
I don't see him.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, good morning, Jim. May I put you on the spot while I actually kind of reconfigure my notes here? Can you do a 1.5 minute analysis or your description of your book in terms of your connections of culture to the historical, to the theme of the book, and say which book you did?
Yes, we did the book, Rose and I did the book, Child Soldier.
Yes.
What was fascinating for me, and in fact, last week, a student in another class who's from Kenya, and she works with Kenyan women who now live in Toronto and are having difficulty integrating into Canadian culture. And thinking about his book, Child Soldier, he uses a Acholi culture as a way of rooting both the children when they're in the forest and the communities when they're wanting to welcome them back. He uses Acholi culture, the language, the myth, and the ritual as a way of rooting both the kids and the communities later. And he uses 4 rituals at the end that he thinks are ways in the Acholi culture to repair communities and relationships. 4 rituals of forgiveness and reconciliation. And this is the way he sees it going forward. But what's fascinating is the use of culture, traditional culture, language, myth, and ritual as a way of rooting people in whatever situation they end up becoming a part of, whether it's the child soldiers or the families trying to reintegrate their children who've become so different or who they think have become so different. Is that okay?
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Jim. I'm going to bring all these points together as we keep going on. I just want us to hear each other's voices in a way. And so that's really just one way of me beginning the conversation in the 1 hour that we have. Now, in listening to the Dabo link, I think it is Grace, and correct me if it is not Miko, who did Mariam Abbas' book, is it? Yes?
No, that would be
Dahabo?
Dahabo. That would be Dahabo.
Okay, now, my Dahabo, is she here?
I think so. Dahabo, are you there?
No.
So I'm just going to interject 1 second, Mbuso.
Yes.
The DAP students, make sure that when you do speak, you come to the front, because otherwise it's hard to listen to sometimes. Sometimes it's very hard to tell like what is being said, because when you're very far away, the students here in Toronto as well have a difficulty hearing what is being said. So just make sure you're coming to the front. I was doing it already. Perfect.
Okay. Is Dahabo? Great, thank you. 1 minute. 1 minute exactly on your take, your key points of the analysis of the book, which was really great. But I want the Toronto people to hear how you presented it to your group that side, because they didn't have opportunity to listen to the link like I did. Okay, so exactly 1 minute, if you can. You don't have to say everything, yeah?
Yeah. So now,
yeah, you can start.
Yeah, the book is very interesting according to my understanding, because it has covered a touching story that happened in Senegal, where the two men were childhood friends. So the book contains about culture, religious, and also marriage, especially marriage. In terms of culture, it talks about marriage in polygamy. So now I want to say about marriage with polygamy, where Ramatullah lived a miserable life and again faced isolation from Maudu's family after his death. So she therefore recalls the past year of her mourning train that took them to Boni. So at the same time, also it talks about the dream can die. So as the Ramatullah said, that I still keep intact my memories. She said it is true that all dreams can die when you found the left hand missing during the plant of need. For example, she was a beautiful and have a passionate body, made Modus transformed to dancing floor and carried their life into a silver plate until they live at 25 years. Imagine, So with 12 children, and her goal was to see the sky is a limit. Unfortunately, the life of expectancy of Ramatullah went to zero due to the weight of the responsibility of her family, and family both are natural and material. So it also talks about inheritance. So in Islamic, it's a way to inherit a family matters. But the book states that the woman is a part and parcel of a man's property in Islamic religion. Not in Islamic religion, some cultures. Like Somali, we believe also like that. So when a man marries a woman, that man thought that this woman is a part of his property. So at the same time, the book talks about, we have a same link to this book, and even some African countries. It has a culture that states that, but they link the religions, but it's not true. But it allows that to force the woman marriage totally. So as the book said that when the Modu died, Tasmir came to inherit the wife of his brother, but she totally refused. So, and I agree with that one. But the beliefs of the religion are still there with the influence of culture. According to my Somali community where I belong, once woman married to her husband, she belonged to that family. Whether she produced children, maybe she has her children or not, the decision lays with the family. Either you remarry again the brother of that of your husband, or you leave the property plus the children totally. So,
can I just interject there? Because in listening to the tape, Dahabo, you said that you were going, if you were to rewrite the book, you would change the way that religion is represented. So because of time, I'm going to just ask you to talk a little bit about how you think you would change or challenge the way that, because there's a critique and it's a good critique, but for people who are not familiar with that, which components of religion would you change in the book? I heard that in the talk from last week.
Yeah, this book talks about religion because now the two people they belong to the they belong to the religions of Islam, and the way they stated about the religion is confronting some parts like going to Hajj. At the same time, they are mixing culture and religion. These two are different. So, and those who are reading this book, they may get a bad perception in terms of racism, how the world is going on today. People are saying that this religion is not good, that this religion is bad because of this. So, if we could not get a person to change these things, I think racism still continues, non-stop. That's why I like to change the parts of the religion and to make clear to the next generation to read more and understand what Islam is.
Okay, so can you give us one specific, it can be anybody on your side there who can give a specific part of the religion that's misrepresented?
Sarafin is here.
Okay, Sarafin, 1 minute. Which part?
Thank you very much. For sure, I'm not a Muslim.
Okay, that's even good.
So I don't know how the religion was bad because to me the book was wonderful, and I say that I thank the professor and my instructor to select this book. The book is wonderful, and the book is like a family life book whereby everybody has to cope with the book. This book is telling us how family members must respect family. So to me, I think that this book is to be recommended to all. Yeah.
Lovely. Getting back to religion, examples.
Hello,
The parts you want to change. I see someone at the back.
Yeah. So,
back.
yeah.
Behind you, behind you.
Because I'm the only Muslim who read this book. So, and the parts that I want to change is inheritance. Education also there.
What about inheritance?
Inheritance, when a man dies,
that's a culture. That's a culture.
But people, they were not talking about culture in the book, but they're saying that Islamic, but they were related. They were.
Can I interfere? Because
yes.
I wanted to know whether the Hawa is ready to change the words of the religion or she's changing the culture of the book. We want to get clear of that. If she's changing the culture, I think that is what is all based in all Cushitic culture, and it is already there, and it is hard to be changed. Now it is even doing better than before. But if it is religion, I think the Hawa cannot change and she can do nothing about it.
What religion?
Okay.
I was hearing the Hawa's presentation like last time, where she's trying to critique is the way the book is written, some part of the book, and the way, the Islamic religion presented there. There are some points where the book is talking about how people go hike.
Go what?
Or saying like when you're going to hike, if you don't have money, you borrow. I think there are some parts of the book that says when they want to go hike for Islam people, they can borrow money and they go to hike. And that's not something real, and that's not something real in Islam. You go in hike, you are going from your property. It depends on how wealthy you are. When you are wealthy and you are capable of doing this, even remaining giving some part of your wealth to the family you're living, what they want to eat, all this daily life, that's the time you can go hike. But specifically in the book, that is what she's getting, that the book, the author of the book is representing something that is not there. Secondly, she was mentioning last time about when the husband dies. You see, when the husband dies, the wives are forced to marry the relative of that husband. It's not forceful. In the Islamic religion, it's not forceful. It is the willing of the wife that if she wants, he marry because there's children there. Just the solution for the family, it is the willingness of the wife to accept the brother of the husband died. So it's not forced. So the idea is that the Islamic religions is wrongly represented in the book, some part of the book. That's where I want to change. That's what I understand. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that critique because we missed hearing it from this part of the continent. And I'm going to just summarize it to make sure that we hear you. We're going to continue to actually discuss it next week in the class here. So there are two components, critiques of the book that I'm hearing you saying. One has something to do with the confusion or the mixed match of culture and religion. Culture, for example, wife inheritance is not a religious component. It is a cultural component of the region, right? And even where it is practiced under some Islamic spaces, still it is not forced upon the woman as it is written in the book. It is actually a discussion between the woman and the family, and the woman has a right to say no. So the biggest rejection that you have is that actually wife inheritance is not a religious component, it is a cultural component, it's a societal component that differs and is found, and I know this, amongst many other African communities, even those that are not Islamic. I know that even within the Christian spaces, there is wife inheritance. Okay, the other one, the other one that you mentioned.
Pardon,
yes.
Professor, this is the first critique that you have mentioned. I wanted to give input somehow. The first that you have said about inheritance,
yes,
religion and culture. As far as I know that when it comes to inheritance, it's a component that already exists in religion, specifically Islam, where men and women are being stipulated the way they are going to be getting their inheritance. However, due to culture, these societies, maybe they are Muslim, that their culture overpowered this. For example, like previously we had where women have been neglected their inheritance in some societies. But I wanted to clarify that the critique that you are including is that religion is a component of inheritance, where it has already been mentioned the share of inheritance for men, women, and children, all the societies. It's not outside of religion when it comes to Islam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You have succeeded in totally confusing me now. You have succeeded in totally confusing me now because I thought I nailed this critique.
Thank you. That's clarification.
I think
that's clarification.
I think what you're saying is that it is much more complex than just a simple divide between culture and religion. There are components of religion that say that inheritance or property, family property, belongs to a man. And that too includes women and children and all other material things, right? So in a way, there are components of religion that make it possible for culture to enact or to put into practice wife inheritance under the banner of religion as supported by religion. Okay. The other component of your critique that I had, Dahabo and the group that did the book, is perhaps part of the language. I don't know if it was Grace. She said, well, we could change in the book some aspects of religion, but there are some words that we cannot change. And so in thinking about that, it would be great to actually just show us which of those words in the book about religion you wouldn't be able to change and why. Yeah, not necessarily now, because that would be a longer exercise, but we would be interested in actually knowing which components would actually are problematic or are a little bit challenging, but at the same time you wouldn't be able to change, perhaps because of respect of faith and the religion itself. Okay, so let me just recap here where we are with these two books and so see if we can move on to a third book there, Alana. I'm gonna put you on the spot to actually talk a little bit about your book, but let me recap about these two books that we've done and try and see if I'm able to highlight some components of religion. So, of culture. So, Jim and group, we have Child Soldier by Opio. That book, mainly, you use the word rooting of culture, rerouting of culture. I want to emphasize that word, but also add the word repurposing of culture. Can you hear me, or am I not clear? Yeah, clear, okay. So I want to use the concept of repurposing of culture, which is directly from the book. How is culture repurposed? It's repurposed, as you said, Jim, for good purposes, to bring people together, to reintegrate people into communities. But it is also repurposed in ways that can isolate. So it's not a very clear good or bad use or clear good or bad. There are aspects of repurposing that are actually very negative that are highlighted in the book. So, for example, the fact that the children cannot run away in the forest, even though they are free, they are in open space. It is because of the recreation of actual life in the forest, the recreation of the villages, the whole concept of living together that holds them. So the culture is recreated and repurposed in the forest, forcing the children to somehow feel like they are back home, in a sense, even though it's a different home, right? So the concept of repurposing is very powerful in that book. In Mariam Abba, I don't want to repeat, it is the dichotomy is really not a simple good or bad. Culture is used together with religion to produce experiences of joy. However, some experiences of exploitation, exclusion, and oppression. Culture is used within families to actually support, but to also alienate, to divide, but also to unite. Culture is used in that book to highlight male hegemony, male power over women. But women at the same time use culture, tap into the culture to actually, in a way, resist domination. Components of culture and love are all mixed together in order to bring up questions of power, hierarchy, and reconstruction of the family, in a sense. Okay, I'm going to be quiet now and put Alana on the spot to talk a little bit about a book. Alana, I'm not seeing you anymore, and you can call upon anyone from the DAB to support you. Where are you, Alana? Oh,
I'm
you're
right
here. Okay, excellent. Okay, talk about your book.
Okay, so did you want me just to give like a little critique, not a summary?
Yes, introduce yourself and talk who you are working with, and then go on.
Sure. Okay,
Yeah.
so I wasn't here the last time we met, so I'm Alana, and I was with Deco and Mohammed, whom I haven't met.
So, Deco and Mohammed, are you there? Can you come to the front and say hello to your partner now that you're going to meet her?
I'm Alana.
They're not there.
They're not there.
Deco.
Mohammed is there.
Okay.
Mohammed is there.
Yeah, Alana, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
and
so we have been for a long time, and we don't meet.
Sorry?
We have been working all the time, like 2-3 months, and we don't meet yet.
I know. So I'm glad we get you today.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead, and then you chime in when you want to fill in or anything. Okay, so so I read Fragments by Arma, and it was a really good book. And I think what Arma was trying to get across, and what I thought was interesting, was he was trying to convey the heavy influence colonialism has had on the society in Ghana, and also how it continues to have a heavy influence. Sorry, I get camera shy, but I think it's ridiculous. Okay. What I think was really interesting, though, is he is almost putting it on the people of Ghana, the Ghanaian people, to kind of correct it. Like, they are responsible now to take the reins and to change things in society. So that was my interpretation. And I thought this was interesting, this book, particularly because it was directly connected to Syed's article and what he talked about with hegemony and symbolic domination. How we can see through this novel that the main character, Bako, came to America for his education, and then he goes back to Ghana, and everyone is calling him, he's a Bintu. So anybody who's gone to Western society is considered a Bintu. And it's seen as like this prestigious thing. And what unfolds is Bako has this huge amount of pressure on him. There's a lot of components and layers of the book, because also we see the corruption in the society in Ghana. And I think Arma is trying to, again, relate that to colonialism and show the results of colonialism and the effects it had on that society. But again, through the corruption, he's trying to put it on the people in Ghana. Like there was one excerpt that he says, the people here, they know what's going on, they see it, but they're letting it go, like they're letting it, everyone get away with it, and they're letting society continue to be corrupt. And it's kind of like, okay, so the West did this, but they're not fixing it. So we have to fix it. We have to change things. So it was a really good book. So many layers to it. It was just, yeah, so.
Mohammed,
did you want to?
Mohammed is muted.
Yes.
Is there, do you want to add anything that you think maybe Alana might have skipped over?
Not much, but the idea of, I just got the idea of diaspora.
Okay.
So, and the idea of immigrants and the refugees started a longer time, and also those people who are traveling to the Western countries and coming back to their country and have most influential, like the political, maybe business, maybe and any other sector in the developing countries. So, and I just I give a lot of good examples in our country, like our president, he was used to live in the United States, and now he's the president of Somalia, and the prime minister also came from Norway. These are the most case studies that we can learn from them. Because the book was talking about those who are just traveling and studying over there and coming back to their countries. So that's one thing that I'll just enhance or empower to what Alana said.
Oh, okay, Mohammed. Mohammed, thank you, Alana and Mohammed over there for actually mapping out this book a little bit more. What I'm hearing also from your point of view, from the two of you, is that the power and hegemony of Western education continues in these new independent polities, now no longer new. But I think you're raising an important point. Alana, you say that there is a burden that's placed on the person who returns and is seen as now higher than and prestigious, occupying a much more prestigious position than people who are there. But I think I also hear you two saying that those people who return, in the case of your example, Mohammed, they do often have opportunity and perhaps the capacity to play the role of rebuilding post-colonial communities. So it's no longer just about the hegemony of the West, but perhaps using the West, the tools of the West to actually rebuild or maybe even to fight back to neo-colonial and post-colonial practices. Would that be something that is part of how you see culture playing on here, Mohammed and Alana?
I think I'll let Mohammed answer that one, because I didn't even consider that when I read the book. And I think like that's just like really cool and an interesting concept that I didn't consider. So I think Mohammed brought that up. So I'll let him answer that one, I think.
Are you still there, Mohammed?
Yeah. I think it's most of because I think you may not have any information about most of African countries, and those who are now in Somalia, maybe some of other developing countries, those who come back from maybe from Western for study, maybe for what they call other kind of when they come back, they are part of the rebuilding the country. They are part of the improving the sectors like ICT, like telecom, like business, like also any other sector in the country. They're also developing for the what they call curriculums in the Minister of Education, like maybe also the Minister of Planning. They have a lot of influence in the what they call government, in the private sector also. So I think it's we are just in case of Somalia, we can say 60% those who come back from the Western countries, those who are contributing their ideas, their also money, and everything. So the book was, I think, when they wrote, they were thinking about what will happen after 30 or 50 years and before. What will happen? So those who now were immigrants like 30 years ago are coming back to their countries and now contributing and rebuilding, investing, and also sharing their ideas, what they have learned from the Western, and trying to improve the society, to improve the culture, to improve everything. So the book was, I think, was talking about Somalia, especially what we can say. And so I enjoyed it, and I got a lot of experience from the book. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. That is actually wonderful. I agree with you, Alana. That is a very interesting concept in terms of how the book and when it was written. And the critique that is offering has actually evolved over time, right? It's evolved from the initial direct inheriting of the colonial governments, inheriting directly from the colonialists, but now things have changed, as Mohammed said. It's 30, 40 years ago, people have repurposed themselves to rebuilding their cultures. And so it's again the dichotomy of, it's no longer just a simple corrupt or not corrupt. The corruption, power, and reconstruction are all now part and parcel of what's going on in many of these post-colonial entities. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna move on. Just so I just want to make sure everybody gets to hear the other person's voice in a way, and then we are able to highlight again the aspects of culture. We have one more.
So can I just ask you a question about that past point? As Mohammed said, people go away, have left the country, or now coming back to these countries. So are they not then bringing some post-colonial ideals, like Western ideals, because they've left, they've gone to the West, they've got their education, and yes, that's helping to come back and rebuild their cultures, their infrastructure within their native land, but is that not then still skewed by some colonial ideals?
I would say it is skewed by many colonial ideas, but I must say that the character in Aikwe Ama's book is very different from the people that Mohammed is talking about. Many of them, or some of them, are actually displaced. So in other words, even though they are leaving to go to the West, he is still part of the colonial circle in a sense, or let's say post-colonial circle. It's mainly no longer just go study and come back. Part of it is really forced migration, where they actually are living not because they choose to, but because they are forced. That doesn't mean there are people who are not forced to leave, but part of the populations that migrate out of desperation, are forced out of, and so therefore their mission of reconstruction, yes, is influenced highly by Western ways of being in Western hegemonies, but there is also the components of their own ideas of what Africa might look like in the presence of peace, in the presence of a home-built democracy, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. now that you're there, can you talk about your book?
I just put myself on the spot, didn't I?
I know, I'm very smart. With whom did you work?
I worked with Mary here in Toronto.
Oh, yes, Mary is there too. So can you say a little bit about your book?
Well, we have touched upon, our colleagues in Dadaab have touched upon it already. We did So Long a Letter, which I agree with Seraphine was a phenomenal book, and that's not what we're talking about. So I will just save that as my aside. For those who haven't read it, please read it because it is absolutely brilliant. And I think Mirko touched on it a little bit in one of the side chats about with the whole religious component being skewed and tied into the cultural. And I think it needs to be separated, because I think, and it's not just within the religion that's discussed in this book, and I think you touched upon it too, Nambuso, certain things happen in Christianity as well. We could probably add Judaism into it, Buddhism. People choose to do, in my opinion, cultural activities in the name of whatever religion that they're choosing to follow. And I feel that is a component in the book with the characters that we saw. In relation to the brother coming to saying, I'm marrying the wife, in my opinion, since it's a semi-autobiographical book, I feel that that's an experience that the author had. It may not be an experience, a cultural experience that every woman in Senegal has experienced or will experience, but I think it was what that particular woman experienced herself, or had someone close to her experience that. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. It does make sense. Yeah, it makes sense a lot. Mary, I won't let you talk because I want us to move on to the next book. Is that okay?
Sorry, Mary, I took over our spot.
That's okay. That's okay. Miko, which one should we go on from your perspective?
So, I'm thinking it might be interesting to tie in at this point Dagnon's elusive culture, perhaps. As a sort of counter to an extent. It's not really counter because I think we've moved from something that's very structured, in a sense, gives a very structured perspective of what culture and religion could be, which is, for example, Mariam Asbah's book. Then we started looking at fragments, which gives us, in a sense, a more fragmented approach to what culture could be, in a sense, potentials and perspectives. So maybe we're moving into a more fluid, in a sense, approach to what culture and identity could be and could become.
Yes.
So it might be interesting to just suppose at this point maybe Dagnon's elusive culture. I don't know if that was where my mind was going.
I think it's Izzy who did that one.
That's me, and then Abdi and somebody else. One second.
Okay, Vanessa.
Yeah.
So is Abdi there?
Abdi is here. Yes, he is.
And Abdullah is the other person.
And Abulon is there as well. I've seen him.
Okay, so let's give the opportunity to the people in Dadaab, and then you fill in, Vanessa. So Abdi, can you do let's see how many minutes we have, a 2 minute, exactly 2, and I'm counting you down and I'll stop you when your 2 minutes is over. Tell us your main critique of the book, Danielle.
I think it's I have 2 of these. No.
I think the Muso is referring to Abdi Aden. That's who she's talking
Hello, Professor.
I think Abdi should be the one talking. Abdi.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you, Abdi.
Okay, thank you. Though you give me 2 minutes, I wanted to at least say something about the book that you have read. It was very interesting. That it was investigating a study that a school that is in Toronto, Ontario, which is a multicultural setting where you call the United Nations, which means that when we call United Nations, that the school hosts so many people from different parts of the world. And the book was very interesting. The only critique that I would like to make on that book is that the language that it's written is somehow ambiguous to me when we are reading the introduction part, that we somehow confuse. But gradually, after we have read the subsequent chapters, we have come to understand that the book was very interesting, that it was identifying about the interrelationship between race, culture, and identity. And what we have seen is that if I connect to the definition of race towards what Omi and Winnet have said previously, that they have criticized the former scholars, what they have defined to race. For example, like Dubos, the objective phenomenon where he's related, we have come to know that the definitions of race is somehow something that's related to the three components that Omi and Winnet has already mentioned in their book, that is something that's related to contemporary politics, something that's related to globalization, global context, and something that's related to historical time. And up to now, if I give you a specific example from the characters from the students that the others interview, we have seen that a student like Marada, she identifies herself as a Spanish, though she hails from or comes from Serbia. In this perspective, we have seen that where students display their culture through where they are. For example, their culture, their former culture, their indigenous culture has been affected by globalization or political concept. So the book was very interesting, and I suggest that I recommend, though I don't have any critic towards this book, but I recommend that it is very essential for the parent expectation in diaspora communities and the actual cultural or cultural things that exist within that society. For example, like the parent expectancies or a child, some cultural expectations back from home where the child cannot adapt in the context of that environment where he is. Let me give my chance to other colleagues also. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vanessa,
yeah.
I don't remember reading a lot about globalization in that book.
Not a ton. It was more about like the diaspora of people, like the migration and immigration of different cultures coming in, and it was like in mass waves basically. So he talked a lot about how the high school went from being like mostly European descendants to very quickly becoming multicultural, and it kind of had like a cultural shock on the school and the students because there was just an overwhelming amount of diversity that came in all at once. And as Abdi was saying, a lot of students were having trouble identifying kind of where they're even from. So it kind of became like a cultural hybridity. Students are adopting different types of attributes from all sorts of cultures and creating their own. And but at the same time, there's the contradiction of traditional values and beliefs and ways of living that are pushed on by families.
Just a minute. Oh, dear. Hey, good morning. I'm in class. on the computer. Sorry about that, Vanessa.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, sorry, I had to open the door. So the reason, Vanessa and Adi, I was actually asking about this word that you use of globalization is because I think you have a very good critique right there, although you didn't think that it's a critique of the book, because you're saying perhaps the lens that could have been used in terms of understanding the population in the school could have been globalization, which is one term that is used perhaps, and I think Abdi and you and Vanessa mentioned the concept of diaspora, but to bring this lens of globalization, which is much more sophisticated than it's used in the book, than it's found in the book. So I like that in the sense that you're looking at using your own lens or perhaps using your own terminology to make it a little bit more holistic, which even though you didn't say it's a critique, I think it is a very good critique in terms of the language that could have been used or emphasized by the book or in the book. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so even though you didn't put it as a critique there, Abdi, I think it's a very good critique, especially since you started by saying the language of the book at the beginning was a little bit challenging. So in a sense, you have a language for yourselves that you use in order to understand and analyze the book, which is really very good. Vanessa, is somebody else with you there?
Like in our group, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have Pablo,
I think I think to add on what the group have already said, that one thing I've seen from the reading of that book, it has mentioned something to do with culture, but there was another example that was a study that was conducted, and they brought it in the books as an example. Like says that culture is very important thing. To maintain culture is also something very crucial. But if you don't maintain your culture, if you don't keep your identity, if you don't protect who you are, that one itself will create self-esteem. That in that study, that there was another community that the study was conducted, and it was found that they have lost their culture. So due to the loss of their culture, it has created an issue that they became low in self-esteem. One, the students are not strong, are not tough in schools. They don't contribute well, and in general, it's brought the importance of the culture. So I was thinking that in a way that, like, there are so many people who do not know their culture, but they are still strong, they are still active in schools, and they still have good positive things toward themselves, while they do not know their culture well. So I thought about that question, but I came to understand that maybe that is how it has been written. But to me, to my belief, culture is actually important. Keeping it is important. But if you lost your culture, you might lose that sense of belonging, or you may lose that self-esteem.
Yeah. Okay.
How do you see it?
How do I say it? You are actually talking about the effects of culture, the way in which it is experienced. And on the one hand, to say it's ambiguous. What you just said is that it's not a clear, simple, you lose your culture, then you are this. You can become. In other words, culture is always in the process of being made and remade. So when you lose, let me use loosely here, your quote unquote original culture, there are components of you that also get lost or ambiguous, that make you unsure of your own everyday experiences and practices, including those practices in schools. However, what you also are saying is it is possible to actually lose or perhaps get disconnected from your original culture. However, that don't always produce ambiguity. Perhaps that makes you stronger, is what you're saying, in a sense. So you're saying it's not a clear, you lose your culture, then you lose your self-esteem. Sometimes you can lose your culture, and in the loss of that original culture, you become stronger. So what you're saying is that it's not a simple black, you lose, white, you gain, black and white kind of thing. And that's an excellent analysis too of the elusiveness of culture. So I like that. It's we can go on and on and on today. I want to go on and on, but I cannot do that. So because Miko is my timer here, and he's for sure telling me we've run out of time, and I'm telling myself I've run out of time because I have to run. What can you say was going to happen for closing, Miko?
Sorry, Nabusa, can you say that again?
What can you say in terms of closing? We're going to send email about next week. You want to summarize all the points over there, and then we see each other next week. Yeah.
We could definitely do that. I mean, I'm okay with. Obviously, we will be here. So I mean, us and the DAB crew. I mean, I think everyone else. Yes.
I think it's like our book has not been touched, and I don't think we are going to have this kind of session. So it's like the professor will give us 5 to 10 minutes so that we also have a say.
I mean, I'm okay with it. I don't know if everyone else is like Professor. I don't know if Professor Lamini and everyone else here is okay with staying an extra 10 minutes. I am okay with staying an extra 10 minutes and discussing discussing Lear as a radical hope.
Okay. Here in Toronto, who is in Radical Hope?
I see Jenny, and Papa's not here, so okay. Papa would be the other one. But
okay, Jenny, you start us off with Radical Hope. Your critique in no more than 2 minutes, and then we will join with the other people. Okay. You're laughing, Miko. You find this very amusing.
Okay. Well, because for me it's a weekly experience, so I'm used to it.
Okay, you start us.
Okay. Actually, I don't have any critique about this book. I kind of agree with Jonathan Neer that I realize this book does stir some controversy.
Okay, start with telling us what the book is about for purposes of those people who did not read the book.
Okay. The book is simply, actually the main thesis is that be courageous and adaptive when facing cultural devastation is another way of living. So when you forced to lose your traditional culture, you can choose to fight, of course. And the other way, the author feels like you can choose to be adaptive. That's another way to live happily. So for me, I agree with that. The author actually, he is a philosopher. So from a philosophically perspective, he feel courage means different in different situation. So the student like Henny from Dada, he's quite, I think he has his own opinion. He feels like, what is brave? What is courage? Courage, it means when you lose your culture, how to say that? I think I should give that to Henny. Is Henny there? He has a lot to say. He has quite a lot. We discuss a lot. I think I should leave this time to him. Yeah.
Kasahun, right? It's Kasahun.
Yeah, I think it's thank you. I think the book is about the Crow people and their great chief called the Plenticus, and the cultural devastation they had faced over there. So, to my understanding, I think it is good for Plenticus to be optimistic because especially in the face of cultural devastation. But there is one important thing I have realized my critic goes to the author, because the way he presented Plenticus, because especially based on the Aristotelian notion of courage, especially Criterion 2, because he said a courageous person is fighting for what is fine or what is noble. So, well, the person who is not courageous is fighting from emotion. So when we look at now the way the Kru warriors are fighting, these were not the people who are fighting for emotion. They are fighting to defend their territory. We can see like counting coups, planting the coup stick. Even they went ahead to the point, to the level where they're striking their enemies. So when you look at all these things, it is something that really goes beyond emotion, because it's like something to do with recognition, because the warrior who killed more enemies is the most recognized warrior. So when I look at that, to me, Plenticus was not as courageous as the author described him, because he took his people to passive assimilation. By passive assimilation, I mean, it's like, you know, the time when the Plenticus advised his people to assimilate or to work with the Americans was the time when they were also facing their traditional enemy, the Sioux. So it was like they were losing grounds to the Sioux. So it's like he wanted to collaborate with the Americans so that the Americans will help him and his people to fight their traditional enemies. Little did he know that the Americans wanted his land and the land of his people. Because when you look at the two treaties they signed, the Treaty of 1851 and 1867, during the first treaty, the Americans have accepted that the Kru people had like 33 million acres of land. But in 1882, after the second treaty, that land was reduced to 2 million acres of land, which means they lost their land. They lost their traditional way of doing things. At the same time, they also lost their buffaloes. Their horses got killed. So if you look at all those things, the way Plenticus guided them, his aim was, he was aiming bigger. He was aiming bigger, hoping that the Americans would rescue him and his people from the Sioux. But that was not the case. He took his people towards passive assimilation because to him and the outer, it was not courageous to fight the enemy. The other way of facing the enemy or collaborating with the enemy is the kind of things they face. So that is why, personally speaking, my strong critique goes to that, because there was also, I can also relate this one with Edward books of Politics of Knowledge. There was cultural imposition. You see, like there was cultural imperialism, because the Kru's way of doing things were all removed and then replaced by the American way of doing things. That was also, it's like these people also lost very many things, because their children were also forced to be isolated separated from the family. They were covering like 50 kilometers. Himself was again converted to Christianity. He baptized himself, he married in the church. There is no problem with that. But all these things are assimilation. I can even relate this one with, I am teaching history in secondary school. So I can relate this one with how the Kenyan Maasais were now signed treaties with the British. In 1904 and 1911, the Masaian chief called Lanana had signed the treaty with the British. So his aim was now for him to be a paramount chief of his people. But during the first treaty of 1904, the Maasais were reduced, the whole communities were reduced to 2 reserves, the Laikipia and the Gong reserves. But after 7 years, in 1911, the Maasai also lost the Laikipia reserves, and then they were only confined in the already overcrowded Gong reserves. So these are the kind of things they did with all the indigenous communities during the colonization period. So
okay, I am. I don't know what to say to both you, Jenny and Abdi. Sorry. Because both of you have such different. It's not different. I think you listening to each other, but you have a different way of approaching the book. Both ways of which are very well supported in a sense. You're coming. What I just liked really is the way in which you started by looking at the way in which radical hope is using the Aristotle's way of understanding emotions and dividing, as though there's a division between emotion and culture. So you were saying that what the Cree people were fighting for was not necessarily emotional or approaching it emotional. That division shouldn't be made, which is true. But I also like the way in which you both are looking at it through Said's lens in terms of whether is this cultural imperialism, is this cultural imposition, or is it passive assimilation of the Cree, which is your word exactly. I don't think that is in the book. I don't think that the author will agree with you there. I don't think so. But it is still a very legitimate, very well supported analysis in a way in which you're bringing in other spaces where colonialism happened and actually how that would have been interpreted as passive assimilation or imposition of some sort. Yeah. How was it working together over there with this book? Jenny, is Jenny still here? Jenny, are you still here?
I think we lost Jenny.
Oh, we lost Jenny.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, Miko, what if we continue the conversation another time? Because I have to go. Very interesting.
That's fine, Mbuso, don't worry.
Lovely conversations.
Professor,
I apologize to the group in Dadaab that we don't have as much time as we should have, but we're going to have these conversations more, perhaps one more meeting continuing of this before the break. When perhaps you are there, Miko, we can coordinate somehow.
Yes, we could.
Yeah, that will make life a little bit better, I think. And you will perhaps structure the conversation in much more meaningful ways. I hate to cut this off because it's really interesting discussion. Yeah, final words, Miko?
I mean, just to say, I think I'll just say that it's thank you so much to everyone for accommodating. I think that's what, and I was saying this earlier as well, because I think the richness that comes out of these discussions is something that trickles, right? And I think we can see that in a sense, because there's never an end to these conversations. I think that's why, what I can say, what I can also add, Nambuso, is that I always created on the Moodle a separate section for like thoughts and reflections on the conversation.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to continue, has other questions, other thoughts that they didn't have an opportunity to, in a sense, to speak to in this space, there is that alternative space. I know it's not exactly the same thing.
The same, yes. Yes.
But it's a way to continue, in a sense, and leave these thoughts open, and you know what I mean, and just keep going.
Yeah.
Let them trickle.
Yeah.
Let them
That's good. Yeah. So perhaps next time, in about 2 weeks or so, when we have our discussion, we will have to start with finishing off the radical hope conversation.
I think so, because it's also, I think in this last conversation, there's a sort of, we see two different ways of looking at culture again, right, that are emerging.
Yes.
So in a sense that on the one hand, this way of becoming, which is what Jenny was hinting at.
Yes.
A conversation about culture, which is always being remade, and that should be, in a sense, always be remade. And in a sense, in Kasahun, what I hear is that idea of the purity of the original culture, right? Which must be preserved in a sense. It must be, and in a sense,
I don't think he's talking about the purity though of the original culture. I think he's talking.
That's my
about,
interpretation, perhaps.
I think he's saying that original culture can be used to fight
resist.
back, to resist.
Back.
I think he's talking more about resistance than keeping it pure. Anyway, yeah.
Pure was my attribution. You're absolutely correct. It was my interpretation of it.
Yeah, I think he's talking
you're
more
right.
about
It's more about resistance, I think, than it is about purity. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
More about what you do with it rather than what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. What you do with it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So it's very open. In a sense, we'll continue. Kasahun, sorry, yes.
Okay, one final word, because Professor and Mirko, it's like when Plenty Coops was hoping to take his people to the next level, he had never expected that all these things happened. He had never expected that his people will be reduced to the reservations. He had never expected that the people would lose their land and all those things. So, though it's like his intention was to take his people courageously to the future, nobody knows. But what happened was opposite to his expectation. Because, in fact, he saved his people. The way at some point, I can agree that the people existed. Even in 1890s, 2,461 crews got killed even when they were in the reserves. So it's like very many things had happened. So to me, it was even better for the people to stand for themselves so that at least they retain their culture and their land, or die fighting that culture and that land. That was
and it's interesting because just to conclude, in a sense, you could see that, in a sense, maybe what was guiding Plenty Coops could be, in a sense, that radical hope that the tomorrow could be better, in a sense, right? So in a sense, that undying hope for the future, for a better future. So in a sense that you could interpret that as that is the radical hope, in a sense, another way of looking.
What missing was that better tomorrow was not well explained by the author.
Fair enough.
This is Don Deepo's, one of Don Deepo's favorite books, by the way. So it will be interesting to have him listen to this tape and see what he says, and the next time we talk with him. Rose, I know you didn't get opportunity to say anything about your book.
That's okay. I think Jim covered the majority of it. I'm also still half asleep. So I think he did a very good job summarizing the culture aspect of the book.
Yeah.
But I think too, the way that we separated in class allowed for both groups to hear both of our takes on it. Because even when I was typing up the assignments, both I guess with any book, everybody takes away different things from the book, cultural aspects too. So I think Jim did a good job. And then I also like too how the groups got to hear both of us talk in class about it as well.
Okay, all right, lovely. Okay, so Toronto, I see you next Wednesday at the Research Tower. I think it's room 749. I will send that an email. We start with the talk and then we go over to our class. The talk, remember, starts at 2 o'clock, not 2:30. So remember to be there at 2 o'clock, but there will be a reminder which is going to be sent on email. Dadab, thank you very much for everything. The language books are out. Miko is going to bring them with you. And one of the language book is, of course, written by me here, your favorite professor.
Thank you, Professor.
And Miko is going to divide who is getting what book, and we're going to take it from there. But they are out with him, and he's going to be sending an email on that. Miko, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mbuso. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for a really amazing session, guys. Thank you to everyone. Have a great weekend, everyone. Dadab, watch out. Take care. Watch out with the rains, and Toronto, watch out with the ice.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Glad to meet you in person.
Yes.
Looking forward to it.
So, bye.
Kwaheri. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Take care.